Henry.
Yes, sir. So cameras on, mics are on for your ready.
All righty. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Let's call this meeting to order for the HB 2522 for February of 2024, which is hard to believe. Thanks for making the trip and continuing to work through the project. Really impressed with the homework that everybody's doing as we look through the comments. I appreciate everybody taking the time to go through and fill those out. It's really the foundation of the work that we're doing. And so thank you for doing that and getting it back in time so our staff here can put it all together and have it ready for the packet for us. So really appreciate that. And some really good work being done. Appreciate the partnership with the Department of Justice and Christy Munson walking us through a lot of that too. She's dedicated a lot of time to working with subcommittees and subgroups on that. So we really appreciate her input. So we'll turn it over to Travis for.
Yeah, just echo Chief Johnson's comments. Super appreciative of folks being here. One note as we think about moving forward over the next couple months, Adam Meyer, who was helping support Chief Johnson in this, is on medical leave. And so I've kind of stepped into his role. And so you'll see me up here just trying to help kind of move things along. And we wish Adam the best. And he's definitely on the uptick, and we'll be back at some point, just don't know when it is. And so until he's back, I'll just be filling in for Adam, and Chief Johnson keep me on the straight and narrow. And we look forward to having that. So thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Why don't we do a quick round of introductions, just in case there's anybody in the room that aren't familiar with each other. So we'll start with Dr. Gemmel.
Eric Gemmel, OSFM Analytics and Intelligence.
Mike Hussey, Fire Chief, Jackson County Fire District.
Hi, Darby, Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal with McMinnville Fire District.
Ben Singh, Fire Chief, Polk County Fire District number 1.
Good morning, Brian Stewart, Assistant Chief of Access Fire.
Hi, Mariah. OSFM, assistant.
Mike Cook, Fire Chief, Chillicothe Fire and Rescue, and representing OBFA.
Chris Griffin, OFDDA and Tangent Fire Department.
Eric Rao with OSFM. I'm a strategic planner and utility infielder.
Good morning, Travis Medema. I serve as a Chief Deputy for the Department of State Fire Marshal.
Good morning, I'm Roger Johnson. I don't know if I was on a baseball team, I would have a position. But I'm gonna have to think about it. What's the person who runs and gets the bat when real people
Bat
get
boy.
Bat boy? Maybe that's good. All right, on the screen, who do we have on the screen that's on our committee with us today?
So I'm Genoa Ingram, and I apologize for not being in person, but I have fallen behind during the legislative session on a number of issues. So I'm going to be double tasking while I'm here. Thank you for your indulgence. OFDDA, OBFA.
Who else do we have on?
Well, I'll go. My name's Christy Munson. I'm with the DOJ. Happy to be here. Sorry I'm not there in person.
Good morning, Claire McGrew. I also serve as Chief Deputy for the Department of State Fire Marshal.
James Clevenger, Oak Ridge City Administrator and LOC Representative.
Good morning, all. Allison Green. I serve as the Public Affairs Director for OSFM. I am not sharing my cold with you all, but I am kind of taking care of all of our tech today and providing some staff support for y'all in the room. It's good to see you.
Mariana?
Morning, Mariana Reese Temple, State Fire Marshal.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us either in person or virtually. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the January 18th minutes. We have been trying to connect with County Assessor Scott Langton, who presented at our last meeting. And I just wanted to confirm, he had so much of the minutes and they were so detailed portion of the minutes. We're trying to work with him and clarify that we were able to capture exactly right what he was talking about. Because he covered a lot of information, he did it very quickly. And he's been off work for a little bit, and we haven't been able to confirm that. So I would like to approve the minutes with the recognition that we will provide him an opportunity to confirm that we captured his testimony and his statements accurately. And then we'll just bring that back next month at an opportunity. So would there be a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
I'd make a motion to approve with confirmation. And also I'd like to add that staff is doing a wonderful job maintaining the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passed. Perfect, thank you. Next up is the visitor influx map. And I appreciate the work, Dr. Gemmel, on that. I look forward to hearing about how you did that. It's really an interesting map, so appreciate it.
Sure. I was hoping that you would explain the map.
Well, I can explain the primary colors on the map. Even that.
Yellow. Take it away.
Right.
Yeah, so actually very excited to share this with you. This was when we first met, I think the first time we got together, and we were brainstorming ideas and different things we wanted to look at and evaluate with respect to just some of the challenges that all the different fire agencies face. One of them was the fact that fire agencies have to provide services to visitors. That's not part of the tax base. And so the question came about, is like, well, what is the additional burden that the districts face with respect to visitors? And so me and my team, we got together, Dr. Andre Schmidt, and some others, we got together and we were just brainstorming what data is out there where we can evaluate, the number of visitors and then be able to break it down at a jurisdictional level. And so we did some research and looked out there and we saw that Travel Oregon had visitor data, as well as ODOT had vehicle travel information as well. And so looking at those, we combined those two different data sets together, and I'll get into some of the methodology of how we did that. And we were able to produce this map of the Oregon jurisdictional boundaries for the fire agencies. And you can see that in the dark green, we just through our analysis of the data that we had available, that's like the lowest level of burden of additional visitors to the existing population. And then the orange and the red are either high additional visitor burden or extremely high additional burden to the existing population. So not surprisingly, you can see that the coast has the most, especially the northwest part, and all up and down the coast has a high additional burden. Central Oregon also has a high additional burden in general, and then the Willamette Valley is pretty stable, as well as spots in Southern Oregon. So looking at the travel data, how we came up with that is we looked at monthly, we took a time period and we looked at monthly traffic volume counts. ODOT has automatic traffic reporter stations or ATR stations, and we looked at that by month. It's actually really, really useful data if you're looking for, if you have some time on your hands, you want to look at the data. It's right on the website. So we looked at that and we try to identify seasonality trends, and unsurprisingly, we could see that the summer months, there was a big spike in the number of traffic recorded on these traffic reporters. It's also very good data source because they have traffic reporters around the state, and pretty much all the districts, most of the districts, fire jurisdiction districts have a recorder that captures data flow within their district or can be represented by it. So that was very helpful in analysis to have that data. So what we did is we looked and said, okay, we formed a baseline for like the fall through the spring months. We said, okay, because that's pretty steady and stable. And then we looked at the summer months and we said, okay, so the summer month increase, that's what we're going to calculate for traffic wise as additional burden, because you can just see the additional traffic. However, that's traffic. And so then we looked at the actual number of visitors as recorded by Travel Oregon data, which was helpful. They have different data sets. Their data sets are more coarse in terms of just geographically based. We were hoping that they had it at least broken down by county, and they don't. They have visitor data broken down by 6 main regions. And so we looked at that, the regions, and then we had to look at the jurisdictions that fell within those regions. And then we had to do some distribution work as well between those regions. But what we did is we were able to capture the number of visitors that were in those regions and the jurisdictional boundaries that fell within those regions compared to the population of what is within those jurisdictional boundaries. And then we were able to come up with, okay, based on what the population is for those regions within the jurisdictional boundaries of the fire districts compared to the recorded number of visitors, we were able to calculate the additional burden that way as well. And as a self-check, because you're also wanting, when you're looking at apples and oranges, you want to see, is there a nexus between the two, or are they just like completely unrelated? The good thing is that when we looked at the regions and the monthly visitor influx data recorded by Travel Oregon, it followed the same seasonal trend as the traffic data. So summer months were much higher than the rest of the year. So we're like, okay, showing the same general trend. So through that, we combined the two data sets together. We weighted them differently in order to come up with this visitor influx index. So because the travel data is more robust and it's more, we're able to assign it easier to the fire jurisdictions, we think it's more representative of that. We gave it a heavier weight than we did the Travel Oregon information. And so just because it's more coarse. So we combined the two, and that's how we came up with this visitor influx map. So it's a lot of words to describe our methodology, but so this is a very, I'm not going to say very coarse, but it is a coarse overview when you're looking at the map. But we do have 2 different data sets that show the same general number of trends, as well as the general increase in traffic compared to visitors that we saw based on the regions were pretty similar and mirrored each other as well. So this is a pretty good, I think, representation of the visitors and the districts that are within there that are impacted the most by the number of visitors that come into that district. So.
Well, thank you very much. There were some areas that certainly weren't much of a surprise for me, but then there are other areas that I looked at and said, that's sort of surprising, but it's great to hear sort of the methodology behind that. Does anybody else have any comments or thoughts about the influx map data, or any questions?
Maybe a question, Dr. Gimmel, like the seasonality of it. Is there's an assumption I'm making that a lot of that on the coast is like summertime, and Central Oregon is, summertime. Summertime is, was there anything you saw, or wintertime maybe for Central Oregon? Was there anything as you looked and the other folks on your staff looked at it that kind of jumped out to you in terms of seasonality?
I mean, in general, summertime was even for Central Oregon, but with respect to winter for Central Oregon, they did have a higher number of visitors in the wintertime than the other areas, like compared to the Willamette Valley. It was still compared to summertime. Summertime was still much higher than wintertime, but if you're looking at the winter months, Central Oregon had more visitors than the rest of the state than the winter months, especially the Willamette Valley, which I can't imagine why. So. Yeah, and then what's interesting is this map again, even though it's pretty porous and it's pretty general, I should say. It did capture, like if you look down in Klamath Falls, obviously the area around Crater Lake has a higher, it's able to capture the higher number of visitors than the rest of Klamath County, I should say. So it's Friday and I just caught myself. I was going to call it Detroit Lake and I'm like, no, that's wrong. It's wrong. But anyway, yes.
Chief Medema, we have a hand up. Chief Rose Temple would like to say something, it looks like.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, so Dr. Gemmell, like as Chief Johnson said, not surprising some areas, but one follow-up question I have is the Travel Oregon visitor counts. Do you know if that accounted for like hotel rooms or is that tracked in a different way?
Yeah, so the data that, and we reached out to them and they pointed us to the dashboards and the information that they had online. So the way they collect their data is through 4 primary points. One is online surveys just of U.S. travelers. Another way is through Travel Oregon partners. So that includes like restaurants, that includes hotels as well. And then also survey PDX travelers. And then they also count the number of visitors through their welcome center. So they have different spots in which they're trying to gather and combine the data.
So one evolution of this illustration that might be interesting at some point in the future is overlaying anything that's not green, because I think that's probably the burden is population based, but overlaying it with rural fire protection districts that are volunteer or combo. And I think, you know, what's most alarming is you look at Curry County, and Curry County, the burden in my mind would be all red if you equate that to the ability, like the capacity down there in terms of volunteer districts versus career combo. And it could just be something to think about. The other thing that just, you know, breaks out to me is it's interesting that Lake Detroit, as you said, is green, right? Because the amount of people. So just the acknowledgement that a lot of this is transportation routes and really small rural fire protection districts. It would be great to get another iteration based on capacity of fire service.
Okay.
And I see Genoa jumped on.
Yeah, I was just about to make that same suggestion. So thank you for making, yeah. It would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing it myself, so I'm excited about that.
Not to put more work on you.
It's very nice illustration. So thank you for doing that.
You bet.
Any other questions or comments for Dr. Gemmell on the influx map? Thank you very much.
You bet.
It's great work. All right, next on the agenda is a follow-up on ORS Chapter 478-001 through 478-390. And I think we have a PowerPoint up on that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Walk us through the slides.
Yep, we'll definitely work through the slides. So as folks recall, and you'll see on the first slide, if we go to that, Amanda, you'll see kind of what we're going to work through, which is 010 through 270. And we'll kind of touch on a couple different aspects of that. One, subgroup work, along with, and then also, sorry, we'll work through the other side too, 280 through 340, and kind of where we're at in the different discussions, and then really looking for input from this group on, you know, does it make sense? Did we answer the questions? Has that work been completed? And really looking to either close out some of these items in terms of the future recommendations, and or, more work that may need to be done if the group feels that that's needed. So on the first one, really, which is 0110 formation territories that may be included, we've worked through that. And, really, the sections of 2A and 2B, as we talked about that and thought about that, the recommendation was to kind of leave that as is, and you'll see that up on the screen. And then as we dove into 2B and 2E, really felt like there may be further discussion with this group and this committee. So that was kind of the initial pieces. Also, as part of that, there was a section in there as we reviewed the scope and authorities of 25-22 with the work group, that section C, forest land, and you'll see that on the next slide, was to be excluded as we worked through 010. And as folks recall, and we've outlined, there were a handful of topics that were excluded as we talked about reviewing 478 and 25-22, and section C, which pertains to forest land, was one of those.
You want to take these sort of slide by slide and
Yep.
take action so we can get sort of notes
Yep.
on those individually. So as I look at this first one, we've worked with DOJ on it, received some feedback on that. And as we look at that section 2A and 2B water supply districts, I think we felt that we should leave that one as it is.
Yep.
Would be the recommendation. And then that section 2B and 2E, probably more information is needed on that one, is what we identified. A lot around the ocean shores piece, I think, on the section E. And it sort of correlates with a lot of the discussion that we've had previously about ocean shores, coastal lands, impact activity, the visitor impacts of state-owned lands. So that whole ocean shores component is something we probably need more research on. So is everybody comfortable with approving the section 2A and 2B piece and then putting the 2E in a parking lot for future work? Is anybody opposed to that concept?
I also think, Chief, as we get into like 310, right, and contracts and agreements, that section 2B and 2E came up also. And so there's this larger conversation around, state-owned lands, agreements, contracts that will pick up as we get into 310 and 315 also. And so felt like that needed some more discussion as we get into that. But we're looking for this group to approve, recommend leave as is 2A and 2B. And then, as Chief Johnson said, a parking lot, and pick up 2B and 2E later.
Yeah.
Chief, I think that influx index that Doc just presented even highlights the need even more because of the coast and especially the high volume of volunteers in those areas.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Chief. And do you want to do these by motion, by section?
Yeah.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve leaving 2A, leave it as it is, and then put the 2B, 2E into a parking lot for future work?
How about
I will make that move or that motion.
second?
Carl.
Thanks, Carl, and Chief Griffin seconds.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Perfect. Let's go to the next one.
All right, 210 directors, organizations, term and oath. And so, there was quite a bit of discussion on this and comments around numbers of board members, 5 to 3, timeframes, and then ultimately in some discussions with the work group with Department of Justice. We did connect with Genoa on this one also. She was part of that. I believe where this landed was recommending that it stays as is and no recommended changes to this, even though there was a fair amount of discussion, and we did include extra folks into this conversation as needed also. And so the recommendation from the group that looked at this was to leave as is. And that would be the motion for the group.
Any discussion on that? Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to leave that section?
I'll make that.
Okay, awesome. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we recommend leaving 478-210 as it currently is written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Perfect, thank you.
All right, I'll tee up another easy one for the group. So as your subgroup worked on 478-228 boundaries of sub-districts. Again, a healthy discussion around this topic also. And it was, again, a part of those subgroup committee meetings. And really the discussion was, what is a sub-district? Do they exist around the state? There were some questions. And some scoping around how many of them are actually out there, how are they being used, best research that we could tell. And Genoa, if you've got other perspectives, that there may only be one sub-district that folks knew about that existed across the state. And then, conversations around population and boundary changes in 190 and agreements. Ultimately, as we discussed this as a subgroup, the subgroup said, in essence, to just leave it there, even though there was only one, there was no real advantage or disadvantage to removing it from the statute. And so the recommendation was keep that same flexibility that exists within the statute. So the recommendation from your subgroup was to leave it as is in the recommendation.
Right. Thank you, Travis. Is there any discussion on that, or?
Who was it?
It's a water district, I think, somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is election sub-districts, right? So it isn't fire protection service district within your district. It's an election district. If they wanted to have voters representing a portion of your fire district and create those separate election districts. All right, any other discussion? Would someone like to make a motion recommending that we leave section 478-228 as written?
Make a motion that we leave 478-228 as is.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
same sign. All right, thank you, everybody. Let's move to the next one.
All right. Again, your subcommittee had a robust discussion on 250. And 250 is meetings and officers of the board. Again, you can see who was part of that subcommittee. A lot of the discussion within your subcommittee really focused around the kind of must meet monthly aspect of 250. Decreasing the number of meetings, and throughout that conversation, again, really focused on shall hold at least one regular meeting each month. As we discussed that and talked about that as a subgroup, while in some smaller districts it may be challenging, but at the end of the day, in all of those discussions, for a variety of reasons, it seemed to make sense. That just stay, and we would leave that language that was discussed as is. So retain the shall hold at least one regular meeting each month.
Any discussion on that, or any subcommittee members want to report out?
I would just say, I think this, and there were a couple of these that, we had a lot of discussion and did nothing with. But we had all had, many of us had had a lot of discussion prior to this meeting and had reached out to some of these districts that we thought this was going to impact. So even though it sounds like, oh yeah, the decision was to do nothing, I think it was really good to go through this process and actually reach out to these districts that we thought were being harmed and find out like, oh, this actually, you actually support this when I would have thought this would be cumbersome for you. So it was very valuable, but I'd move that we move forward with it as written.
So that is a motion.
Yes.
Okay.
I was trying to-
I'll explain the background because I was in the same boat, right? I thought that this could be an inconvenience for rural districts, but what we heard was that they need to get together monthly because they're the groups that are signing checks and they're paying bills and it really isn't an inconvenience for them. It's a matter of function and they need to do that. Right, which was sort of a surprise, I think, when we dug into it. But we do have a motion on the floor. Chief Darby, do you second? Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second to leave as written. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for that one.
Thanks, Genoa. All right, the next section that we've had some discussion on was 478-260, fire chief headquarters, fire evacuation routes, and emergency medical services. You know, as this one was discussed, really section 1, if you look at that, it was around, is there some language that could be clearer, punctuation be better? And then some of the like tactical words like conduct versus operation. So that was a lot of the discussion that led to the subgroup. Discussions around fire experience and training for fire chief qualifications, some authority pieces. There was some simple housekeeping like strike bell whistle in the language. And then a pretty robust discussion around section 4, which was emergency and medical services. And so as the subgroup talked about this and included others in this conversation, felt like there's some work that needs to be done here, especially around section 1 and also section 4 of this piece of the statute. And so again, section 1 is around clear punctuation, and then section 4 is around emergency and medical services. I think the recommendation from the group was your subcommittee was more work needs to be done and more conversations need to be had, especially around section 4 and
1. And as part of that background discussion, also, we recognize EMS modernization is a legislative issue that's currently in session and it's part of a broader EMS discussion in the state, I think. So we know there's a lot of work going on in this space and we think it's really important to align any statutory changes here with what we know is coming or is coming. So I just think there's a lot of work and a lot of moving pieces there that we probably need to do a little more research on. So that's what I heard from the committee. Is there any other comments or thoughts around this one? I think what the recommendation would be to table it, continue to work on it would be the subgroup's recommendation.
And then who is on that subgroup, Roger?
I think it was the same subgroup, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's myself, Chief Medema, Stangy, Stewart, Genoa, Chief Hussey, and Christy Munson with DOJ. Happy to add you to that, Carl, if you'd like to be.
Please.
Chief, can I be added to that too?
Yep. Let Chief.
I think I was actually on it, but I missed the meeting.
Okay.
I apologize.
Yeah. And as the subgroup or subcommittee worked on these, you know, and I think we've talked about it with the full committee, you know, the real intent is we're probably not going to get into necessarily wordsmithing to the exact word and the, you know, exact sentence that would potentially go into a legislative concept. It's really around the principles that are associated with it. Like this needs change and it needs to say something to meet this intent. And, you know, as we continue to think about the future and we think about, you know, a legislative concept, I mean, legislative council, Department of Justice and others will help us with the actual words. But if this group and if the subgroups and the main group can get the intent, we want it to say something like this so that it can apply this way within the fire district. That's really what we're aiming for and targeting with the work of the subgroup and the work of the full committee. Does that make sense to folks?
It does. Thank you.
Makes sense to just kind of expound on that a little bit. So for me, especially section 4, section 1, I understand the qualification part, but the section 4, 2024's fire service has a much different base than 1957. We've gone from 5% medical and 95% fire to 85% medical and 50% fire subjectively. So for me, it's really important that we capture that, especially around the number 4 area.
So Chiefs, I would note too, Christie's hand is up, so we might save some space for her, please. And then Carl.
All right, let's go to Christie.
Thank you. I was just going to note for Amanda that the 3rd bullet point and the 4th bullet point are a little too specific and not quite correct. I understand why whoever took the notes put those there, but in my experience, if we come back to this a month or 2 from now, it might kind of confuse us because we'll forget what the real issues were. So with the committee's approval, maybe I can draft a summary of what the issues were for the 3rd and 5th bullet point, send it to Amanda or whomever the note taker is, so they can put it in there that more concisely captures the concerns. Or you can leave the same language and you just have that in your notes so that we can discuss the issues a little more granularly when we finally discuss them.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that'd be great, Christie. We appreciate your help and support doing that.
Christie did provide us some feedback in a Word document that I did email to Cassie. So it is the feedback we received from Christie is with Cassie to see how we can make changes going forward.
And so the vision would be then we'll take that and Christie, if there are additional thoughts, we'll take that to the subgroup and that'll be the basis for the conversation on what those discussions are around bullet 3 and bullet 4.
Okay, Carl, you had a comment?
A question. In 682, is there any 478 reference in that statute anywhere? I didn't look. I was just thinking about the not only EMS modernization, but if we have a relating clause in 682 that allows us to do something or something that's preventing us from doing something. And I remember those things we couldn't talk about in this committee relating to ambulance service selection or ambulance service areas. Does that, in that 3rd bullet point, does that make sense? I mean, if there's already a relating, then I think we can talk about it without worrying about someone coming in and saying, why are you talking about that, for lack of a better term? And then just be mindful of that authority to provide medical services, I think is important, but I can see how other folks might seem like that's a power grab. Just thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you for highlighting that, Carl. And I think we do need, as part of the follow-up research on that, we do need to cross-reference that 682. And I think just a point of clarification, I think there was no restrictions around the committee's ability to study issues related to EMS. It was just around forest land, classification, and prescribed fire. Yeah. Those were the issues we were prohibited from looking at.
I'm getting all my short session stuff mixed up. So we're the fact that we can talk about ASA, I think, is interesting. If we didn't have any limitations, I think that's a place we could really drill down, maybe a little bit harder than we may have thought, if there's no problem for us to do so.
Yeah, and I think, Carl, that's a big bulk of the reason why I think we wanted to move this is there was a lot more discussion that needed to be had especially around the medical side or the EMS side of the equation. And believe there were 4 items that House Bill 2522 said that this group couldn't get into. One related to the state forester, one related to forest land and forest land assessments. The other one was smoke and RX fire, I believe, field burning were the topics, but EMS and medical topics were not on that list.
And then Chiefs, we also have Chief Ruiz Temple with her hand up as well.
Go ahead, Chief.
Maybe just consideration as we move into the space, or depending how much we want to move in the space, is acknowledgement that there is a EMS work group currently around modernization, and we might want to engage Rep. Graber and then the appropriate individuals if we're going to have a subcommittee on that, just so that we're not, you know, in conflict or paralleling similar conversations.
Okay. Thank you for that. We'll make sure that we get that added to the notes that we do that outreach. So are there any other comments around this section? People comfortable with tabling this one, continuing to do some work and coming back and reporting back on that?
Amanda, did you catch who else was interested in participating?
Carl and I believe Chief Darby is on there.
Okay.
And then I might add Kathy.
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion that we table this and continue additional research on this item?
Sure. So
Is there a second?
Second, Koenig.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to table this and do further research. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Awesome. Thank you. Great discussion on that.
270?
Yep.
All right, 478-270, reports of directors, state fire marshal cooperation, uniforms. And as your subgroup really discussed this in depth, really the topic that this related to, we characterize as more of a policy situation, and that as a group, we should really discuss this further, and hoping we can maybe do that. And really the crux of it was the shall report monthly aspect of that to the state fire marshal. So as you can see, 270 sub 1, the district board shall report monthly to the state fire marshal upon forms prescribed by the state fire marshal, information the state fire marshal may require, and shall at any time upon request furnish further reports or information. And so really didn't have a strong recommendation on this and wanted to bring it back to this group to get a little more sense of the importance of that and thoughts from the group on that. Open it up.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments on that?
Was it kind of discussed within the committee? So when I read this, I thought it was just kind of legacy language. So for say the monthly report, I mean, we're all making NEPRS reports, so maintaining image trend. And there's verbiage in there for as required. So for me, it just sounded like it just needs to be updated on the verbiage. Is that discussed in the group?
I don't know that we talked about, you know, the specific image trend piece. I think there was some discussion about most people are doing this electronically anyway. I think it was more broader on monthly versus quarterly. Was it impactful for maybe a volunteer agency to have to do this? But I think you're right, Chief, that most, even the smallest organizations are going to be doing this electronically after the incident. So,
yeah, I remember some conversation on form doesn't dictate written or paper. It's
right.
Just electronic, or wherever this form lives, it satisfies the.
So the question is everybody doing it monthly?
So this, just throwing my 2 cents in. So there is a statute out there that talks about incident reporting, and that is being done electronically, and that's being done, you know, most of the time within a week of the incident. what we're seeing. So this seems to be a little bit different. This seems to be like a report from the board itself as opposed to incident reporting. So, but yeah, to answer the question, we are getting it.
Yeah. And I guess maybe for the agency, are you receiving the data that's needed now from a reporting perspective, or?
I say
So I
Chief
think-
Rose Temple has her hand up. She may have some context. Sorry.
All right. Let's go, Chief Temple, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just kind of going to go right there, Chief. I think that there are a few statutes that my preference would be that we punt to later in the year, wherever that is. This being one, statutes around and first reporting another. And I'm interested in the comments and maybe some recommendations, but because of the new NERIS that's coming our way, possibly through the NFA, it may impact our reporting process and statutes. I would say at the question you had, I don't believe our agency is receiving these exact reports. And I think that this is legacy. However, we do receive reports from fire districts around data profile, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what would be good is to have an internal agency meeting of maybe myself, Claire, and Dr. Gemmel to really unpack anything that talks about reporting and come back with a report to this group, because we might have better national understanding of expectations in the next few months. And I would hate to make some decisions now that would make us change our decision at the board or at the committee level.
I appreciate that insight, Chief. And so what I heard is that the recommendation likely would be to create a work group within the agency to research this and bring a recommendation back to this committee going forward. Would somebody like to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make that exact motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, that exact motion.
Okay. All right.
We should probably ask Travis and Claire if this is going to be okay. It sounds like more work for OSF. I'm kidding.
100%.
Fully support it, Carl. Thank you.
Carl, we just put you on the work committee, so thank you, Carl.
No, I am not that person.
We'll amend the motion to include Carl and Travis and Claire support 110%.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to have the Oregon State Fire Marshal create a work group, work through this one, come back and report out to the full committee. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Perfect. Thank you for helpful. Let's go to the next one. Are we 280?
So as we looked at 478, 280, this is really around employment of assistants. And as we talked and thought about this, there was probably maybe more questions than answers as your subgroup worked on it. And so some of the discussion really focused around how many districts use this, how many boards hire their own assistants. And then there was a connection to another statute and what an assistant is. And this was a pretty robust discussion, as I recall, on 280 and should this continue to exist, and or does it need to be defined differently? And I believe, Christy, you had some thoughts on 280, I believe, and its connections. Am I correct?
Yes, I'm happy to summarize them if you'd like that.
Yes, please.
All right, so whether required in statute or not, it is always taught as the best practice that the chief is the sole manager of a fire district's personnel. And there may be statutory requirements that that's the case too, but we've not researched that. But anybody who's attended my fire district trainings or Genoa's or OSFM's, they talk about the chief being head of the chain of command. Here, this allows a board to hire an assistant without defining what an assistant is. And arguably, the board would be the one who has hiring and firing authority over those assistants. So it could arguably set up a situation where a board, if it gets crosswise with its chief, or unintentionally hires assistants that it supervises, and that assistant could get crosswise with the chief. So I think it would would bode well for us to look at that, to figure out what this committee would like to do with that kind of tension in the statute, and recommend some amendments for next session, should you agree that that may be a problem.
Thank you for that, Christy. And we did have a really good, robust discussion about that. And what does it really mean? Is that assistant chief? Is that a clerk for the board? Is it staff to schedule meetings, attend meetings? What is an assistant to the board? And it's just really unclear. And so I think Christy brings up some great points. It probably merits further work and further clarification, but love to open it up to the group as well, or to other committee members for feedback or thoughts on that.
Roger, it's Carl. I have a couple comments, but I'm second or third in line. Go ahead. I'll raise my hand and wait.
I was gonna say, yeah, Genoa had her hand up.
Oh, thank you. I think it is a problem, and I think it's murky, and I think it creates, maybe not intentionally, but it creates an issue between the board and the chief, which shouldn't be there. And I'm just wondering, while Christy's here, if there's any ramifications, since it's not clear anyway, of just removing that language.
I don't think so. I think that would be a policy call for the committee. We can do whatever the committee wants. If they agree that this sets up an unnecessary conflict and an unnecessary tension between boards and chiefs, then, and they feel strongly about it, then you just strike that language. If they want to keep some kind of authority for boards to hire some kind of assistant, maybe further define that and kind of cabin it so it doesn't create a conflict.
Thank you, Christy.
Yep. And then I'm also tracking a hand from Carl online, chiefs.
Okay, let's go, Carl. That's pretty.
Well, I think further definition, maybe it would be better to tell or to say what it isn't. So you wouldn't want to limit the board to be able to hire counsel, for example. And then that what typically happens, certainly in fire districts more than cities, and this is fire district ORS, is that we could define the fire chief as the higher, most places, not all, but most list the fire chief as the final step in the hiring process and the firing process, for that matter. So if we keep it, I would recommend further descriptions on the word assistant, and maybe more importantly, what isn't or what isn't allowed by a board to do, if you would. That's all.
Thank you for that, Carl. Chief Cook.
So I'm currently working with a department that is having these exact challenges, and monetarily and operationally, it is extremely challenged. It's created quite a bit of angst in the department, and some clarification would really help out with that. And it's been ongoing for quite a while for this exact reason, because they're not sure.
Okay.
So I would like to see some clarification.
Yeah.
I think murky's a good word, because I've previously discussed how they weren't the directors making that report, and I'm not sure if the directors need to be making.
Correct.
So we can kind of define some things a little bit better.
Any other thoughts?
Yes.
I see it was amended in 1969. Do we have legislative archives that we could dig into to maybe see if there's some history on this?
they are available.
I'm not volunteering.
Yeah. I know Christie's.
Just be it would be interesting to see what the legislative intent might have been, if it's even exists anymore.
So I have dug into the ORS 478 statutes for legislative history on the provisions that were 1969 provisions. They're very unhelpful. You have to go and pull the documents. There are, of course, no recordings, and they're usually handwritten in there. They don't provide a lot of reasons. And since this is a policy call for the committee, I don't know if in this instance legislative history would be incredibly helpful for you, but I am happy to do it if the committee would like that.
Some of my takeaway from that subcommittee meeting was that Genoa wanted the committee to do an outreach to boards and find out, well, boards and districts, find out who's doing what, report back the names of what they were doing and who's doing it, see how many differences there were. And then from there, have DOJ do some legal history and bring that back to us. So it was something we were maybe going to discuss further in March or April, once we get that feedback.
That's correct.
My sense, just being part of the subgroup and listening to the discussion here, is it is murky. I like that word. And that probably needs to be further defined, Chief Cook, to the issues you're dealing with, and to Carl's comments, thoughts. And I think the subcommittee recognized there's probably some work that needed to be done to further define it, just to add clarity, if that's fair for the members that were part of that.
Yeah, I am familiar with one organization down southwest that has two individuals reporting to the board. One is an office manager, one is a fire chief.
Wow.
Hmm.
Well,
It's a small organization.
Go ahead, Genoa.
If nobody's ahead of me, this really goes right to the core of what the Oregon Fire District directors really believe in. Either you have faith in your chief or you don't. And if you have faith in your chief, you should allow as much latitude as possible for him or her to to hire the staff that he or she needs. It's just, if you don't trust your chief, then there's a problem. If you do, then you should let the chief run the district. I mean, from the personnel standpoint.
Thank you, Genoa.
So if I may, in reflecting on Genoa's comment here, there may be occasions where you have individuals that are serving as the fire chief or appointed as the fire chief that have certain skill sets or a certain amount of time available to do particular functions. And they may prefer to not really have oversight over the office, over administrative functions. So I could see in a smaller organization where a different setup may be preferred by the fire chief themselves.
Go ahead, Genoa.
Well, yeah, that's true. But then in those circumstances, I would think you would have an office manager or that there would be within the budget a layer to where it wouldn't fall to the board. And I'm not saying that the board can't do it. It does create a conflict if the board is hiring personnel and then you're telling the chief that you're in charge of the personnel, and if there's a conflict there, I mean, it just creates a dynamic that shouldn't be there. I'm kind of cranky about it.
Well, we appreciate your experience and insight with it, Genoa. So what I'm hearing from the group is we probably need to do a little more work, a little more research on this, table it and bring it back. Look at it again.
This may be crazy talk, but I'm wondering if there could be the possibility for once operational bleed over. I mean, and turning everything upside down here,
right,
which has other ramifications too.
Right.
Organizationally on scene.
Yeah.
Doing our job.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is.
All right. If people are comfortable with the concept of tabling this, put in the parking lot and doing further work on that, let's get a motion to that effect. And, right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table 478-280 and do more research and bring it back to the group. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, let's go to 290.
All right, ORS 478-290 or additional authority of districts within 10-mile radius of city or 100,000 or more. This one was discussed, I think, really early on. Like, why do lighting districts exist? I think was the bulk of the conversation around this. And so as a subgroup discussed this, while we don't know of any that may be in use, also in that discussion was why would we take the authority out of the statute? It exists already. If there's something in the future where it may be a benefit, you know, why pull it out of the statute? Really, there's no impact in terms of the work that the subgroup did that they could see or understand. And so as we talked about it, and I think this group has discussed, it may not, like, folks have a hard time, does this make sense fit in here? Also, just working with the Department of Justice, it seemed to make sense to just leave it as is, and that it provides flexibility for the future should this circumstance come up and a district want to be able to do this. So our recommendation to the subgroup was to leave it as is and not remove the any language in there, especially the language around lighting systems. So
I'll make a motion to leave the existing language.
all right, Chief Hussey.
We have a second.
Second, Kenny.
Thank you, Carl. We have a motion second to leave as is. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Perfect. Thanks for down. Well,
Or do you want to get through?
how is everybody doing? We've got a couple more. Do you want to take a break now? Or push through 300? Push through. All right.
I was trying to get a cup of coffee, but we will continue on. I'm teasing.
No, you go do your thing.
All right, 478-300, contracting with others to provide facilities, services for fire protection, road lighting authority, open burning and fire permits. So lots of discussion here. Again, we reviewed the intent of 25-22, in scope, out of scope. As we mentioned earlier, open burning, field burning was a major section of this, and permits, which is sub 2. We already talked about section 1 under road lighting facility services. And so as a group really dug into this, a subgroup dug into this and talked through it, we felt like recommended leaving it as is. Sub 1 really didn't see any changes, and then subsection 2 was out of scope per the guidelines for 25-22. So that was the discussion around 300, and your subcommittee recommended leaving it as is.
All right. Is there any further discussion on that?
Thank you.
Is anybody aware in the state, is anybody partaking in this or actively being utilized?
The road lighting districts. We could, best I recall, we could not, nobody knew of one. Genoa, I don't remember if you knew of one, but what I recall, and other members chime in, I don't think anyone could point to somebody and say, yeah, there's one of these set up here.
No, and in fact, I work a lot with this issue because I have a utility client. And lighting is a big topic of discussion among the utilities and the right of way and who controls. Yeah. So, but no, I don't know of any districts at all.
How about, sorry, if somebody here was before, I'll raise my hand.
Go ahead, Carl.
Go ahead, Carl.
All right. In the interest of decorum. Isn't like Deschutes County 1, they're a fire district that that contracts with Bend Fire, a city fire department. Does that come into this? Because I see or road lighting, says for fire protection or road lighting. I don't know that it really changes our action here at the bottom. I was just wondering if there's more than one fire district that maybe like the city of Portland and Sowies Island, like Fire District 62 or whatever that is in Multnomah County. Does that anything in this change that at all? I guess if we're voting not to change it, then it doesn't matter, and I will lower my hand.
I don't think it would, Carl. I think most of those intergovernmental agreements are done under ORS 190, under Chapter 190 agreements. So
okay, all right.
I don't think they're doing it under this section. If, like you say, if we're leaving it as is, that shouldn't impact anybody.
All right. Disregard my previous comments.
So I'm curious, just in the last review or the review that we did in prep for this section, those pieces, I remember recalling there that there is some additional taxing capacity for street lighting, a penny or a dime per thousand, whatever it is. Maybe it's possible to look at and see if anybody's collecting that tax as a fire district and see if anyone can utilize it.
Just as a data source of
So
the
the
way
data source,
Steve is doing it.
We're trying to point to it and see if anyone's doing it. Maybe
To be DOR,
Yeah.
follow up DOR.
Yep. And again, by leaving it, you know, as is, if somebody is out there, Chief Stangy, did you maybe have an example? I was trying to remember.
He was saying there were a bunch a while ago. He thinks there's still one, but cannot remember who it is.
Yeah. I think Chief Stewart brings up a great point. We can check with DOR if there's an assessment or a fee associated with it. We can check in with Department of Revenue and see if that exists in the system. Again, your subcommittee recommended just leaving as is. So if it does exist out there, it would be no impact if somebody was using these authorities.
For the record, I'm neutral on 290 and 300. I'm just curious what the history and the purpose of putting this in there originally was. That was my main question, was why.
When we looked at open burning and field burning, there were multiple agencies that also work within this. It was ODA, ODF, and DEQ. So if we wanted to find out some data on permits or whatnot, we could also reach out to these other agencies.
Yeah, I think the authority piece, Christy, I don't know in, you know, all of your research and history, if you have anything on, you know, why road and lighting facility services districts, if you know anything for the history.
You know, as a former fire district attorney, what I would say is, doesn't really matter. You got extra authority. Maybe just keep it there in case you need it someday. I don't know why it was there, and we can do that research for you, but it would probably be of limited use to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add, I agree with counsel, Christy. And a lot of these, if it doesn't matter the amount of time and dollars it might take, research dollars to go find this, does start to play into these kind of findings. If the group recommends keeping it, it might just be beneficial to keep it and not unpack it too much only from a financial standpoint. But if it's going to make an impact on the council, I think we could support that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is likely leave it as it is. Probably no harm, no foul. If somebody's using it, they would still have the authority to do that. Probably no giant impetus to change it, is what I'm hearing. If people are comfortable with that, then I would entertain a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. We have a motion to leave 478-300 as is. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Perfect. Thank you. Go to 305.
All right, ORS 478-305, contracting with others for mutual communication systems, contracts in other states. And so as we look at this, you know, lots of discussion here around different entities that are in this space. SEIC is one of those. And my recollection of the conversation was we discussed it and talked about it and recognized that there are bigger and other things at play with SEIC, and, you know, really wanted to bring it back and probably put it as a topic for the full committee at a later meeting, and that it was a pretty meaty discussion. I don't know that we landed the plane anywhere in that conversation, just the recognition that there are other pieces, and it may need to be discussed with the committee. We also had a good discussion around, are there authorities in other places that may cover this? And that was under ORS 190 and agreements that were in place for authorities under 190. And so my recollection is the subcommittee really didn't come to a conclusion on this. And we were going to tee it up, but then also discussions around authorities may be covered in 190.
Any discussions or thoughts by anybody?
Was the original intent of the subcommittee reviewing it to see if it was overly restrictive?
I think the intent was it, I'm not sure people were that familiar with it or had questions with it and just wanted to dig a little deeper into it to see if anybody had familiarity or had done that. But I don't know, Travis, do you have other thoughts on that?
I think a piece of it also came out of, and we included it, and we'll talk about it later in the meeting, the DOT exercise. Communications was a piece that came out of the DOT exercise. And I know when we did that the very first day, you know, that connections there. I think in the discussion, there is a lot of intersection with PSAPs, with SEIC, and all of these connections. And so we really didn't gel around as a group what to do with it. And so, you know, the recommendation was get some feedback back from the council and see what next steps may look like. I do believe, Christy, we talked a little bit about maybe authorities in 190, and that, you know, we didn't want to do anything with the statute that may affect things in 190, and 190 may grant authorities for us to already accomplish what we need to accomplish around communications. But I'm probably getting out over the front of my mic with that.
But here's a consideration, down Southern Oregon, Colstein Rural Fire District looks into California. It's separated by the Siskiyous. They contract with Siskiyou County in California for all their dispatch services.
And I think that's certainly loud and identified. Christy, any thoughts on the applicability of 190 to this issue specifically?
So 190 already gives you the authority to create a jointly controlled and owned 911 agency. I've created those before using 190. The concern I have, and Genoa knows this well, is that anytime the legislature purports to give you authority you already have, they're in fact limiting your authority, right? However, as I scan this statute, I don't see that it acts in that way. It just kind of doubles down on the authority you have through 190. It doesn't really limit you in any substantial way. It's hard, though, to review it for something that hasn't occurred, right? So I'm to kind of look and see how this statute might limit your authority, and I'm just not seeing it. I think also, and this is where I would defer to Genoa, I think also monkeying around with the statute might cause you more heartburn than just letting it be.
I'm so glad you said that, because I questioned myself over and over. I thought we need to just leave this alone, leave it alone. And I'm always afraid I'm missing something. So I'm so glad you said that, because I didn't think we should change it at all.
Yeah, I think probably if we do want as a group to impact change in communication systems, I don't know that the statute is the place to do it.
Okay. Any other comments?
Christy has something.
Yes. We have a comment online?
Yes, sorry, I have a wire management issue here. So the only thing, you can use your 190 authority, for example, to establish mutual communication systems with other 911 districts. This statute says any district may contract with another fire protection district or a city to establish mutual communication systems for fire prevention and protection. That's not for dispatch. So this is more limited than the authority you already have in 190. I don't think it could be read to limit your 190 authority. It's just an odd fit. I don't think there's a whole lot of tension. If you say, hey, we're just operating under 190 and this is what we're doing, it's something different. Because frankly, I don't see, who establishes mutual communication systems only for prevention and fire prevention and protection? If you're going to spend all that money for mutual communication system, isn't that going to be for all dispatch? It's so expensive. So that's.
Yeah, was that a common sense comment?
Well, lawyers don't have, we don't use common sense.
I started my career with a separate police or a fire only dispatch. So I certainly know that they still may actually be in existence. So, and now the counties, for example, Clackamas and Multnomah, and WACA for that matter, are county agencies that aren't mentioned in the 190, right? So I think leaving this alone allows us the most latitude. Unless somebody wants to put Claire and Travis on a subcommittee to study this. Otherwise, I vote to keep it the same.
Chief Stangy.
There might be a spot on the statewide interoperability. No, maybe I'm missing a ton of the nuances, but so separate from our PSAP, we pay the county a portion in order to maintain some radio towers. And so when I think of the communication system that we're contracting with the county to provide, that's separate from our PSAP, and the county is not an RFPD, nor is it a city. But I feel like we should still be able to do it.
Through one.
And we're gonna keep doing it
Through
through
190.
So 190 doesn't just say PSAP.
190 is basically all intergovernmental agreements, and it includes out of state government agreements. Yeah.
Maybe part of the issue is not having the authority to do this, but since that's in place and it's all, divvied up, if you will, are we having issues with actual function of the system at the user level? It's like we've got the county doing the stuff. We've got the equipment in place, but when you get it down to the user level, you click on the mic, you're not able to talk and even talk. That maybe some districts are having issues.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the discussion, Chief, that, went over to the PSAP conversation and the SEIC also. And I think as the group talked about it, it's, there's the operational aspects of it, clicking the mic and be able to talk, and then the enabling legislation policy that allows for the design of the system and the agreements that occur on the system. And just as I've listened to the conversation, based on comments and based on thoughts, it's really, if this doesn't limit the authorities in 190, it's just another avenue and another venue. Maybe we just leave it as is, to the point of if we do something to it, we wouldn't want to exclude authorities that we have in one.
Chief Cook, do you have a comment?
I support this strictly just on the contracts in other states. As you were explaining earlier, I know down south in Klamath County, same thing with Tule Lake and some of the others. So this expands on the 190, but it gives us the ability to go in other states.
Yep. All right. Any last comments?
Yes, Christy has her hand up online.
The only thing that might help, again, I defer to Jenna on this, is if we dig into the statute and we're going for it anyway, maybe just putting, in addition to any authority granted under 190, fire districts have this additional authority. And that way, nobody could ever argue, oh, no, this statute limits you only to this piece, so you can't do it in 190. I'm guessing Ledge Council may not like that language, but it would help.
Okay.
Love the way you think.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is it, when was 190 enacted? Perhaps 478 preceded 190, and so it provided certain things, but 190 since been enacted and this was opened up a lot of things.
So I was looking in it right now. I can find a date of 1965.
That's what I found. Yeah, that's what chat found for me.
For us 190.
Yeah. It's possible because it's.
Well, that would make more sense.
Yeah. Maybe that was the. Yeah.
Well, I'm hearing, generally people okay with the statute, likely no need to change it. If we did anything, and Christie's recommendation may be to sort of wordsmith, add some verbiage on the front end of it, if we go forward, reflecting the connectivity or in addition to the powers of ORS 190, clarifying that. But generally, I'm hearing leave it as it is and move forward. Are people comfortable with that? Okay.
I will make that motion to leave as is.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Is there a second? Second. Right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, great discussion. Thank you. 478-310.
Right, Chief, as I recall, the subcommittee, I keep using this word, but this was one of the more robust conversations I think that the subcommittee had this in 315 as they looked at connections and its responses to fire, public safety incidents outside its own territory by districts and municipality, and then, liability for cost. And you'll note that we did invite 2 additional members in for this conversation. And so for this conversation, we were joined by Chief Daniels from Seaside, and then Chief Bullock also from Doug 2. So they joined us as part of that and provided some perspectives and thoughts. And again, along the theme of, reaching out and getting subject matter experts that may be dealing with these types of issues to help inform our discussion. Ultimately, the conversation really, from my recollection, really focused on the cost side of the equation and who pays for services. We did discuss inadequately protected, and then really around payments for responses. And again, a very robust discussion. And I think the recommendation from the subgroup was to bring it back to this group, but the recognition that we probably need to do more work on this and have a deeper understanding. Chief Palmer will join us around lunch from Mid-Columbia to talk about the Scenic Gorge, which was 315, which we'll get to next. But lots of discussion around this, bring it back to the group, and we likely need more work on 310, Chief.
Thank you, Travis. Yeah, there was a question. I mean, the statute in section 1 says that, the district responding shall be paid the contract or reasonable value. It doesn't say who shall pay, right? Is it the jurisdiction you're helping? Is it the person responsible for the incident? Is it the state? It really doesn't clearly articulate who will pay. So there are a lot of issues within that that we really couldn't, as subgroup, come to consensus on. We just think it likely should be placed in the parking lot with more research done and try to get more clarification on this issue as we go forward. But we wanted to get the full committee's feedback, and if anybody's using this, things that you've ran into, concerns that you have about it too. So I think that certainly be appropriate at this time to open it up to the full committee and get any feedback. Anybody have any thoughts?
Maybe one other element that was discussed was rates. And you'll notice in there that it uses standardized costs scheduled by the state fire marshal. The mode plan did come up in that. And then again, we had Chief Bullock join us, who is, I think, on the front end of implementing Senate Bill 1068, and got some information from Chief Bullock around how that's going. That's an annexation bill that passed last full legislative session. And he had some thoughts associated with how he's moving forward with 1068 and what they're doing in terms of billing. So just additional thought that I would call.
No, I do appreciate that, because one of the things that he brought up from 1068 was the 3X billing for unannexed properties within the service area has a different billing multiple that's identified in Senate Bill 1068. So it was a good discussion with him as well. Any thoughts or comments? Is anybody uncomfortable with sort of tabling this and digging into it a little more? Or does anybody have anything that we need to put on the table associated with this right now?
I think talking through it in the future is definitely a good idea. I've been researching this for the Mo Plan Committee this year, and this statute is tied to another statute, which is 476-290, which is all tied to an OAR, and all of these statutes, OARs, and the Mo Plan point back to one another. So there's quite a lot of context. I just pulled up a super long email I wrote about it a couple months ago. But definitely important to return to, not only for this group, but for the Mo Plan and conversation around standardized cost schedule, which again is tied to the other statute as well.
Christy, I think had her hand up. Christy, you want to jump in, and then we'll get to Chief Stewart. Go ahead, Christy.
One thing I noticed in these notes, which I thought was a mistake and is not, is on the fourth bullet point, so section 2 should be updated to be more than planes and trains. It's not just limited to planes and trains. It's limited to planes and incidents on transportation routes. And I'm not sure, I'd have to go back and check to see if there's a statutory definition of transportation routes. I would encourage this committee to consider whether and how you want to make sure transportation routes includes trains and railroads. Because, does it?
Oh, sorry, I don't think it does. I'm sorry.
I'd have to look at it. I think there is a statutory, definition, but I know we have trouble collecting from railroads for railroad incidents within our districts. And if we could strengthen this, and again, this would be a heavy lift legislatively, right? Because the railroads jealously guard this, to make sure that transportation routes includes railroads and tracks, or maybe just ask me to do that research, because if it's just incidents on transportation routes, and transportation routes are just highways, you are actually not able to use this statute to charge railroads for incidents on their tracks. That may be the intent. So just some ideas.
Yeah, I think on the next slide, Christy, there is a section 3 that defines transportation route.
Okay.
And essentially says, as used in this section, a transportation route means a roadway, waterway, or railroad right-of-way against which no taxes or assessments for fire protection are levied by the district or city.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Chief, I was just gonna highlight that we've been successful in the hazmat program under this for a responsible party on railways. But to Christy's point and Mariah's point, I do just want to put a further highlight, exclamation, bold, underline, that these are all very connected to the Mo Plan and how the fire service uses transportation. Well, how they use the I guess, Mariah, the matrix, right? So it might be good to do a little OSFM staff work on how all of those are connected and maybe provide that to Christy to see if there's any strengthening that needs to be done or items that we're kind of missing, if that makes sense.
Appreciate
Lastly,
that. Yes, Christy.
do we have any need? Does the state have any need to have this kind of authority on forest land? Because certain forest lands aren't included. And if a train is causing a fire and it's running through forest lands, wouldn't it be nice to have the authority to collect from them?
I think that's out of scope for the 25-22.
I would say it's out of scope, but there is, Christy, some conversations that Travis and I are having on recouping conflagration costs that might be able to roll up in a different place. And we've been kind of taking a look at similar language. So I think there could be a one-off on that topic, but not connected to this necessarily.
Thank you. So thank you for reminding me. I was getting a little greedy.
Good. And I think there was some discussion, if I remember right, too, around, the mode plan rate. And is that an adequate rate? And does that really reflect the standby cost, the cost of having a fire station and staffing? And is that really what the mode plan rate was designed for? Right? The mode plan rate was designed more for deployment for a couple of weeks, reimbursing these costs. And is that really the dollar amount that should be used for billing for some of these situations? There was also discussion about that. Chief, did you have a comment there, Chief?
I did. You want to go first?
Go for it.
I just want to make sure that we don't lose momentum on this. If I remember correctly, the DOT exercise, this was one of the biggest topics was recouping costs, which is huge for majority of the districts across the board. So I really don't want to lose momentum on this particular section.
Thank you for that. Chief Stewart?
Going back to just the idea of the railroad and what's included, is a transportation route as it's used in section 2, would that include us responding to incidents that are no longer located on the transportation route, but are off transportation route, whether it's a car down an embankment, whether it's an accident that's ended up, from the route itself to state lane or something else? Like, what's be nice to make sure that we're able to be compensated for things that may have occurred, but ended up off the road.
It does speak to the right of way. So railroad right of way against which no taxes or assessments are levied. Outside of the right of way, I don't think it speaks to that.
It'd be good bullet to make sure that we get in.
Try to get it.
We're gonna have a recommendation around that. So. All right, I'm hearing a lot of interest in continuing to work on this. High importance level likely for the committee, and some clarifications around rates and some of the other sections of this portion statute. So if someone would like to make a recommendation that we table this and continue working on it, we would take that.
Make that recommendation. Table for the discussion.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. 3:15, I think we're gonna have more work on that. Do we want to table this one until after our presentation?
Yeah.
Do you think, Travis?
Yep.
Okay. We have an expert joining us at noon to talk about the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area and this section of statute. So I think it'd be good to maybe cover this after that. So that moves us up to 478-335.
All right, 335 contracts for medical and hospital services or insurance. We did a little research on this, the history of the section. It was last updated in 1963, And, you know, basically my recollection of this is we didn't really have any comments and there were no recommendations. So it's just leave as is and move on.
Anybody have any feedback or other ideas on that? No? Would somebody like to make a motion to that effect?
Make a motion to leave it as is.
Second.
Right, it's been moved and seconded to leave 478, 335 as is. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Go to 478, 340.
340, payments, premiums or charges on contracts and employee contributions. Some of the questions revolved around ORS 243 and employee rights and benefits. There was a question around could it affect paid leave? And then just what was the overall intent of 340? Christie did do or will do some research on the section. I don't remember. I think will do is the right word. And again, it was, you know, last updated in 1969. There were no real recommendations that came out of this, and I don't know. I think the thought would be if Christie thinks it's valid to do some research, we do a little research. If not, just leave as is. But Christie, I don't know if that captures our discussion around this.
I believe I had to step away, and so I wasn't here for this discussion. The best thing that would help me is to know what is the problem that the committee's seeing with the statutory language as it is, because just doing legislative history, especially for older statutes, doesn't really help you. And I don't want to waste your money.
Yep. So I think the question to the group is, are there any concerns or are there any issues or things around 340 that we need to identify and look at? Chief Cook.
The only question I had is, I know there's currently a bill out there right now. Will that affect that at all? Is there a first bill out there that is that going to affect this at all? Yes or no?
45.
That's just looking through this, seeing if there's a PERS implication. Carl had the lead. I'm not seeing a PERS related impact there, but I'm open to other thoughts or opinions on that.
Where I was going with that is the employee contributions. I didn't know if the new bill that they're looking at would affect this particular.
So that was the question. Okay. Yeah, we can do some research on that and follow up on that.
I do have one question.
Go ahead, Christie.
What does the statute mean by service contracts? I understand what it means by insurance, but is that something that anybody in the room has used? What is a service contract? Could be anything.
Right. Yeah, I don't have any experience with that.
The only thing that comes to mind for me, Christie, is at least within Class Fire, we are self-insured.
Yeah.
And so we have Loomis, which is our, plan administrator. And maybe that's the use of a service contract in this term. We're not paying for insurance per se.
I only have one remaining question. That was, does this conflict with the CBA? Because it states that contributions shall be only on a voluntary basis. And most of us have cost sharing for insurance premiums in our CBA that aren't voluntary.
Yeah. So do we want to table this maybe and get clarification around per CBAs and contracts? Any other thoughts on that? Are people comfortable with sort of tabling that and doing a little more digging? Does that make sense, Christy, to look at those three issues?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Would somebody like to make a motion that we table this and we look at those three identified issues within statute, which was the PERS, CDA, and contracts?
Motion that we table this.
Okay.
Second.
Motion second to table 478-340. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Awesome. Is that the last one?
The next slide is next steps and great work.
Great work. All right. We have some things to work on. We're able to clear the table on several, which is good, right? I think the field is sort of narrowing down a bit, which we'd like to see. So appreciate everybody's help on that. Slide up there. Consensus recommendations from today will be included in the final report. We're talking about any points of conflict or clarification. We'll do a little more work on. And then DOJ is going to help us out on these two issues, plus the ones we identified today. So appreciate that work. Anything else before we take a break? We probably should take a quick break and 11:12. So why don't we come back by 11:30, and then maybe we could start in the next section and wait for our guest speaker to pop in, and then we'll shift to that. All right. Thank you, everybody.
And you can turn your mics off. Press the button.